Good morning, it's incredibly early. I've just arrived in my new youth centre to do some painting. I bought a spray gun, which I've never used before, and it's going to be all kinds of fun. But before I got down there, I wanted to talk very briefly about basically crafting better talks to young people. And for kicks and giggles, I thought we'd use Aristotelian rhetoric. Now, if you've studied the classics or PPE or Greek philosophy or law or even just speech writing, at some point you've probably come across Aristotle's rhetoric. And we're going to use a very basic summary today, the same summary that everyone uses, ethos, pathos, logos, to explain what it is he's talking about. But we're going to take it and go, how do we apply this to talking to young people, giving a message or a talk to a group of young people. Now, if you've not already watched it, I do have a video on crafting better talks based off the messenger, the messagee, and the message. It's very similar, and you can click on whatever link is above my head, which will help you get there to it. But the difference really here is going down to the roots of what makes a persuasive message. Before Aristotle, people were very suspicious of rhetoric. People were very suspicious of orators, particularly for what they saw as emotional manipulation. You could learn from people how to basically manipulate a court into giving you a lesser sentence by taking compassion on you as a criminal, through using the kind of rhetoric teaching that was around pre-Aristotle. What Aristotle wanted to do was restore balance. So he said there were three parts to healthy and persuasive rhetoric: ethos, pathos, and logos. Now, very basically put, ethos is the credibility of the speaker. Pathos is the ability of that speaker to connect emotively or empathetically with his audience or her audience. And logos is content, it's reason, and it's structured, well-researched content. These three things need to be in balance, but they will be different depending what type of person you're speaking to and what type of message you're trying to persuade those people with. Now, often when people talk about Aristotle, they say actually all three of these are meant to be equally weighted and equal importance, equally balanced, but that's not what Aristotle said. Aristotle was a huge believer that logos, that the word and the reasoned way in which you put that word across, the content itself, was the most important. You could be not quite as credible and not quite as connective with your audience as long as your content was pretty good. He believed in all three, but for Aristotle, content was very important. As for Christians, we might say the same thing, especially the more down the conservative spectrum you go. You hear a lot of Christian speakers saying, as long as you've got the content right, as long as you're doing word-based teaching, the other two, your credibility particularly, doesn't really matter, nor does it matter to raise people's emotions. And I want to argue with that a little bit. I think content is incredibly important, but all three of these are essential for a persuasive message, particularly to teenagers. So let's go through them. Ethos. Ethos is about your credibility. It's about your trustworthiness to deliver that certain message. Now, this is all very generalized, but if you're a baby boomer, likely chance is for credibility, you want to hear about my qualifications. You want to hear, my name's Tim Goff, and I've got a theology degree, I've got a philosophy degree, a master's, I've got a master's in missiology, first class, I'm a PhD student, and all of this gives me credibility if you're the type of person who's looking for credential in order to listen to me as a credible source. For teenagers, particularly this generation of teenagers, that just might not be true. That could add some credibility to some people, but really what they're looking for from you as high credibility priorities is your authenticity, your genuineness, your trustworthiness, your storytelling approach, and your active listening skills. Yeah, other things are important as well, but actually for a lot of teenagers today, they're looking for a person first. They're looking for that genuine moment of encounter where they feel heard. Now, when they feel heard, especially when you weave that in with good storytelling and a transparency about yourself, you come across to a teenager as more credible. Now, if you start all your talks with teenagers with, well, I went to Bible college and I've got a lot of theology degrees and I kind of know what I'm talking about here, I'm not suggesting you're going to have the opposite effect, but you're going to have to work hard to build credibility beyond just, I'm really clever. And I struggle with this because that is my background. My background is doing the thinking stuff and then believing that gives me the information. But actually what they're looking for first is genuineness. is, am I genuinely caring about and connecting with them? And that really brings me to pathos. Pathos is often reduced down to emotion. Are you able to emotionally or stir people's emotions? When people are emotional, they're more likely to engage and more likely to retain your talk. And it's just not true, because emotions can include things like anger or spite, or just being frustrated with you as a speaker. And so you might not want those emotions, and they might not be helpful emotions to connect with your message, your logos. So really what we're talking about is not straightforward blanket-based emotions. We're not talking about a lot of electricity in the heart. What we're talking about is affections. Stirring their affections. And this is a word that's used a lot in the 17th century, and today we think about it as like love. I'm giving you my love, I'm giving you my affection. But it's not an accurate description of where that word comes from. Affections is a bit of a mixture of emotion and intellect. It's almost like soul and identity. It's how do you connect the thing that you're feeling with a little bit of reasoned understanding. It's, I know I'm feeling this powerfully because of this. And when you stir your affections, you're not switching off your intellect. You're being emotional, you are becoming heightened emotionally, sure, but you're not switching off to what you think about it. And so to be a good pathos communicator, what you should be doing is connecting with them with high levels of empathy. You're looking for what do they care about, what things that are really on their hearts, what are things that are going to make them go, oh, I really want to think about that deeply because that's challenging me emotionally and it's shaping and changing my life. If you want to speak to teenagers, you need to look for pathos moments, and you need to look for a pathos approach. And that basically means crafting your message in such a way that will connect personally and honestly and clearly with the people in the room. What is it they care about? What is it they should care about? How will this change their life? It can't just be a transferal of information. How will this challenge and rebuke even, or stir? How will this energize? How will this equip them to do more than just think? Pathos. The final one is logos. Logos is usually two sides of the coin. It's content and reason. It's content and well-structured way of presenting that content. And so this comes down to a very simple thing for me in youth work talks. I think a lot of youth workers, and it's not necessarily youth workers that have this problem, it's the expectations for youth workers. You see it at Bible colleges where youth work is taught, you see it in job descriptions, you see it in line management structures. There's not a really high set of expectations for youth workers to be thinkers, which is awful. It feels like, oh, you're a youth worker, you can kind of just be simple and entertaining and you don't have to go into a lot of depth. And it's just nonsense. If you're talking to someone with less base information, you need to know more yourself so you can communicate it to them clearly. Youth workers, forgive me, but they do need to be scholars at some level. They do need to be theologians at some level. A lot of youth workers today are talking about young people as theologians. It's an important thing to think about, but it's nonsense and does not work if you don't consider yourself a theologian as well. And so youth workers, I think this is a challenge to us, logos-wise, to make sure we are putting good stuff in our talks. We're not being just simplistic or overly simple or overly reductionist. What we're trying to do is be people of good content. We're putting real research, real exegesis, real information into our talks. We're giving them things they can go away and chew and grow with when they leave us alone. And so this is really important, that we put good content in a good structure, in a clear way, that we're reasoning well, we're not pulling the wool over their eyes, we're not trying to hoodwink them into accepting some emotional message. We are being, if A then B then C, we are being structured and clear in how we give our talks. So ethos, pathos, logos. Build your credibility through your authenticity, your transparency, your ability to listen, your storytelling. Connect with them, pathos, at the level of things they care about. Try to draw high empathy lines between your message and their life experience. And logos, let's actually do the work, crafting and creating well-researched, well-exegeted talks that bring real information to the plate. So very basic, using a bit of Aristotle's rhetoric. Ethos, credibility, pathos, affection stirring, and logos, real, good, well-reasoned content. I do believe if we do these things, our messages will get better and our young people will grow quicker and more robustly, and will be able to take more information on themselves and take more responsibility over their own faith. So if this has been a bit dry and a bit long, but hopefully some of that's been useful. Ethos, pathos, logos, credibility, affections, reason, information. I'm going to go down and paint. I have definitely spent more than enough time doing this. So God bless you all, and see you next time.